all so very much for being here. As you are aware, I'm Jonathan Hill, Dean of the Seidenberg School, and I'm really glad that you're going to have a chance to hear from these powerful people today on this discussion on the pandemic in the workplace. And we're going to talk about the impact the pandemic has had on your career opportunities and goals. And we're going to identify strategies and solutions to keep you on the path towards fulfillment and success. We had this beautiful weekend. It's always a beautiful weekend in Miami, Jackie Lee, but we had this beautiful weekend up here in the New York area, and I think a lot of us are feeling like spring is coming, and vaccinations are coming, and real life is coming back, and the career opportunities that you came to Pace University to have are coming back as well. So to guide us in our discussion, I'm delighted to announce two PACE alumni panelists, Helen Altshuler and Mary Beth Henderson, and they will share lessons and insights from their decades of experience and expertise in career transition, talent management, and success in their fields. They are both brilliant technologists, and I'm honored to have them back here and honored that they are alumni of Pace University. Excuse me. Helen Altshuler. Hi, Helen, and welcome back to your home, away from home. In addition to being an alumna, Helen holds a special place in our hearts. She serves on our board of advisors at Seidenberg. And Helen graduated from Pace with a BS in computer science. She's a technology executive with over 20 years of software development, startup CTO, and she's been the director of engineering at some really famous companies you've heard of, like Google, PeerIQ, and JP Morgan Chase. Currently, Helen is a co-founder and CEO of EngFlow, a SaaS startup that is redefining the way teams build software, leading to better tools, happier engineers, faster product iterations, and more successful companies. And Helen is unique in that she has moved, it would seem seamlessly, from these major corporate behemoths and into the startup world. And she's clearly addicted to that because she keeps going back for startups. And I think this is going to be the really successful one. But Helen has advised a lot of startups. She's been advisor and mentor and coach to other CTOs and CIOs. She's an instructor at Girls Who Code. She's a career speaker and presenter on issues around the technology industry, and particular focus on women and creating opportunities for women in the industry. And she's a hackathon judge and a mentor to a lot of people. And she's passionate about developing a diverse tech pipeline. And she's gotten recognition for that. She's been recognized among 10 engineering leaders closing the gender gap here in the New York area. And we are delighted. I don't think we've had Mary Beth with us in some time, so we are so glad you could be here. Also a PACE alum, Mary Beth graduated with her MS in computer science from the Seidenberg School. She holds a BA in mathematics from Manhattanville College. And Mary Beth is a technical business leader with extensive background in IT services management, product management, resiliency solutions, and integration. Currently, Mary Beth manages a team of IBM Z Systems hardware offering managers, and they are launching product offerings to a worldwide client base. Prior to her current role, Mary Beth was the senior manager of the IBM Regional Resiliency Data Center in Sterling Forest, New York. Other roles Mary Beth has held were in the resiliency and disaster recovery space, so big pressure, high stakes. Mary Beth also managed in the hiring and recruiting space for consultants, sellers, and technical specialists who support IT services client solutions, and that role included diversity and university recruiting. Mary Beth's working experience has also included teaching secondary and adult education and coaching and mentoring in both sport and business. Volunteer experience has included supporting causes for those in need, as well as educating individuals and groups in health, fitness, and nutrition. And I think this is a rare opportunity to talk with two women who are so focused on human development in the technology space. So this is a very special conversation. So Mary Beth and Helen, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jonathan, and you're welcome.
So Helen, if we can start with you, the events of 2020 have transformed the workplace in a lot of ways. And I think all of us are wondering how many of these changes are temporary and how many are permanent. So if we could start with you, Helen, share a little bit about what you see as the significant changes, whether it's short-term or long-term, that's going to impact the way we work and the way we should look at developing our careers.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting conversation. So actually, as COVID started, I was still at Google and managing my team. And so that shift to remote work was pretty rapid. Google is actually one of those companies that traditionally did not encourage remote work. In fact, the whole point of working at Google was because of the amazing collaborative spaces and food and just like lots of really nice areas for teams to be together. And so that was an interesting shift. And so in terms of kind of commenting on how I saw that transition and how I managed that for my team, I can see that there's definitely a shift to more remote work, more flexible work, but there's a limit to how long teams can be successful and productive and happy over the long period of time. And Google has put in a lot of thought into this over the past year. I think there was a recent announcement by Ruth Porat that they're investing like some huge amount of money into redefining the coming back to office. Like, what does new office look like? So it's pretty clear from that investment that Google is betting on the new in-person experience, but not betting on fully remote is here to stay. Now that said, when I started thinking about EnchFlow with my co-founder, so he's based in Munich, Germany. I'm here in New York City, and I right off the bat said, and that was in February of last year, before really any of the lockdowns started. I said that why don't we try to emulate GitLab and also Mixpanel, which are known as really successful, fully remote companies, because we are already distributed. And the challenge with small distributed teams is that it becomes inequitable kind of experience once you are in one location and a remote location. So it's one thing when you have two main locations, both have self-sustaining teams, lots of opportunities, but it becomes much more difficult when you have 3 people in one location and everybody else is remote, or 10 people in one location and 5 remote. And so we were contemplating, how do we become a fully remote company? I was exploring GitLab best practices. They published an amazing manual. Any of you that are either managers or leaders looking for ideas how to do remote work well and remote collaboration, I would look to those manuals that they've published on how they've been operating for the past multiple years before any of this happened. So I would say that the pattern that I'm seeing, smaller companies are more likely to stay fully remote. And new companies, new startups are embracing being fully remote. Now, for the first time ever, Silicon Valley accelerators are accessible to companies across the world, because typically I wouldn't go for a 6-month timeframe to California because I have my life here, so I would not put it on hold. But I'm part of Alchemist Accelerator out of the Bay Area because it's fully remote. So there are definitely opportunities, and I think the smaller companies will absolutely take advantage of that. And that also means that your workforce is going to be more global than ever before. I'm currently hiring in all across the US, because even though I'm based in New York, I'm thinking, where are my customers? Well, my customers are in California, Colorado, and some of the other states. So I'm thinking, all right, I should probably emulate at least the time zones of my customers. And so I think that will be a really interesting shift for any kind of product and customer-centric businesses, that how they think about where to hire. And it also affects us. How do we think about where to live? Maybe the life is better in the countryside, and you can have those kind of remote opportunities. I can't imagine myself without New York City, so I'm kind of stuck here. But those are the trends that I'm seeing. I think the big companies and banks, you've seen this press from Goldman recently as well, is that they're really trying to figure out how to get people back in the office, because you're missing a certain aspect about the camaraderie, collaboration, that teams are really thriving on. And so, from my perspective, it's the big companies that will be doing more investment in the new office experience, which will be really fun to watch what that's going to look like. And the smaller companies, they're going to take much more advantage of the fully remote global workforce.
Wow, that is really interesting, Helen. And Mary Beth, I'd ask the same question of you, but I just want to add, so much of your business practice has been about resiliency and having companies prepared to deal with stress and problems with their systems. Has that been a help to you as you dealt with this year of quarantine? And what, again, are you seeing emerging in the way we work from this challenging time?
Yeah, I would first agree with Helen's thoughts on the small versus the larger businesses. So I'm with IBM, that being a worldwide company. And we had a large initiative not too many years back, maybe 2 or so, to after there was an influx of offshoring activity, IBM brought people back to the workplace by the discipline that they worked in. So marketing were co-located in certain areas and technology in other areas. I happened to work at the Poughkeepsie plant where the machines are manufactured. And with that, we've always had a remote community. One of the positions that I had, I was remote for 6 years, but that back to the office initiative was full steam ahead. And so now the brakes have been put on that. It will be interesting to see where that falls out, but I think it will fall into a hybrid model, like Helen mentioned. And offices are starting to look at things like airflow and facilities and how to lay out, safely the areas where people are co-located.
Yeah.
Regarding resilience, one of the things that we saw in the industry when the pandemic first hit, a lot of spending got shut down. Unemployment hit hard, and we did see spending drop in certain industries, but we also saw spending increase in certain industries. So banking and finance invested in IT infrastructure, which included enhancing their resiliency, because all of a sudden people were doing online buying, and probably everyone has seen now what's happened with Amazon just exploding. And so they increased their infrastructure, and all of that digital communication requires resiliency and backup, and that is not inexpensive. It's very important to us when we hit the enter key or we flip open an app on our phone, we want immediate response.
Mm-hmm. Now, really interesting. And if I could follow up, Mary Beth, you have this big systems experience, but you've also, gone into the micro side in terms of talent development and executive retention at IBM. What do you advise professionals do in this situation to keep their career development and their personal career goals on track? I mean, I think a lot of people have gotten discouraged because companies stopped hiring, and there were jobs posted, but no one got a response to the resumes they sent out. And I think a lot of folks, and I think some of our students, have become discouraged because, again, it's business has stopped for a while. And yes, there are signs of resurgence, but what advice do you have for these folks?
I really like this question. It touches on things I'm very passionate about. So the first piece of advice I have, and this is a theme I have carried with me in my life, is to network. And that's a big general term. But personally for me, I network at work. I network in my cycling club. I'm the family networker, getting people together. So networking is really critical, and I want to come back to that. So the issue about resumes going out and people not getting responses, that's a sensitive area to me because it's just a communication weakness, I think, that's in the industry in general around hiring and recruiting. It has always been there. Has COVID made it worse? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that it's important for people in these times to don't assume things are moving slower. Some industries have turned down, and some emerging industries have really accelerated. Everything is digital now, and I don't think it'll be long before we don't see much of the dollar and the coin in practice. So just a couple things around that. Continue to network. It's really important. During COVID, people are going through this remoteness, if you will. They are remote. They might feel remote. They're not being visually seen necessarily. And so you have got to put yourself on people's radar. And how do you do that? Network, find a mentor, ask for introductions. I shared with Det and some of the women in technology in a prior session. Don't have the opinion that, oh, you know, I'm not, my time is not, the person's time is not valuable, is too valuable for me to be calling on them to ask for advice. People really like to mentor. So put yourself out there, ask for introductions, build your network. I am a big advertiser for LinkedIn. I think it's a very good platform for networking. Do some research about the industry that you're looking to get into, and talk to people that are in that industry. So really put yourself out there. Some people may be going through a slower period right now. Double down on getting those resumes out and learn some new skills. It's a good time to do that.
Yeah, and actually, I want to echo that. That learn the new skill has been one of the key kind of areas of mentoring that I've been advocating for at least for the past 5-6 years, especially to people that work in large companies and especially maybe working with older technology. How do you market yourself? How do you upskill yourself? There's never been great ways to do this like over the past 4 or 5 years. And especially if you're in this time that you're looking for a new opportunity, look at the kind of couple of different positions and see what are the skills that they need, and use this time to learn it. And a few really, really great examples I've seen on this is getting open source experience and getting cloud experience. And so again, if you're working with larger companies that are more traditional and have older technology, you may not have any cloud experience, or you may have very limited cloud experience. And from my Google experience, I can tell you that it doesn't matter which cloud you have experience with, pick one, but learn it, even get some certificates. That doesn't hurt, like certified architect or certified DevOps engineer, certified cloud administrator. And these, as long as you have one, all other cloud providers and companies using all other clouds see this as a signal. Well, you've learned one, you can learn the other one. There are a lot of similarities. In fact, there are even ways to translate different products and infrastructure components between clouds, so you can easily make that transition. And the second one, again, focusing on engineering career paths, is open source. One of the best ways during an interview is to send people samples of your code. You cannot do that if you work for proprietary software. But if you can pick a project that you like and you can contribute to open source, maybe you're using some open source framework like Elasticsearch or some of the Python libraries, especially for data processing. I've seen that being very popular. Contribute to that. And at least first start using it, build a few apps, put it on GitHub, Bitbucket, any of the open source platforms. and then use this as a way to show people that you're able to learn new technologies and also that you have code samples. Now, of course, that comes with a caveat. If you do that, make sure that those are well documented and have tests, because software industry over the past 5 to 10 years has been moving very, very aggressively into the test-driven development and into very developer-friendly developer security ops type work.
That's great, Helen. Thank you. And we're talking in part this afternoon about career paths, and a lot of these folks are going to be starting their first job out of college this summer, and some others will be going off to their internships. What advice do you have on making, I don't want to say an immediate impact, because that sounds like you have to change the world on your first week in the job, but what advice do you give about being a new employee and making yourself indispensable to your boss and your team? Mary Beth?
Jonathan, this is my hands down favorite question to be asked. When I hire new employees, I tell them to do two things. To do what they say they are going to do when they say they're going to do it, with every task and every day that helps to build reputation. Secondly, when people come to you for information, they have a question, you don't know the answer, maybe you think Helen has the answer. So, Jonathan, I don't know, but let me introduce you to Helen. She might know. And I have seen that really accelerate people. They begin to build a reputation very quickly. The other thing that I would share in this vein is I had a new team that was an emerging skill about 10 years ago. And I have a favorite quote by Jerry Rice, and that is, "Today I will do what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't." And I shared this with some of my team, and they posted this sign, they made copies of it, and they put it all over the network IT floor. And by doing that, if you go out and learn that new tool, nobody in the office knows Trello. I'm going to learn Trello. You may only know how to spell it on day one. On day two, you're already more expert than everyone else who doesn't even yet know how to spell it. So tackle things that people are unwilling to do. When I hired on at IBM, I was offered third shift. I was 21 years old, and all of my friends were going out on Friday night, and I had to work Tuesday through Saturday. But it got my foot in the door. So do the kinds of things that others are maybe not willing to do. And it can even mean things like taking an undesirable shift at work, as well as maybe you take a drop in pay to enter a new and exciting industry. If you are in an industry or a position that you don't like, and you're higher paid than something else, in the long run, you're not going to be happy. So I've seen people really kind of shift their career goals for the longer gain and for the longer success.
That's profound advice, and I know I'm going to try to start doing what I say I'm going to do. So I'm going to be a changed person, but that's, really profound. And Helen, what does it take then to start to build a career, right? You're in a job and you get through your first 6 months, and then all of a sudden you've been there for 2 years, and you've had these amazing transitions in your career. Startup, major corporations, financial industry. You can't get more uptight than the financial industry, and then you're at Google and doing all these cool things, and then but you've taken yourself back to startup. So talk a little bit about a career. You've had this amazing career. What does it take to build one, and can you plan for it?
That's a very interesting question. So can you plan for it? I am a planner. I went to PACE with a goal I'm going to study computer science because somehow I thought in order to manage people in a domain area and be effective, you need to be the expert in that domain area. So I thought, I didn't really, to be honest, like think too much like what would be my domain area. But I wanted to manage people. I wanted like leadership was something that I just like as a child, like always aspired to. And then I don't know, either somebody recommended or I'm not sure exactly how I got to realization that to be a good leader, you need to have a domain depth in something. And so I actually took 2 courses at PACE my first year. Well, I'm on other courses, but 2 career deciding courses because PACE is known for business and technology, like many other things. But to me, being an immigrant, though I needed a money-making profession right off the bat, and not something that I can build up my way over years. And so I took accounting and computer science course as just like as electives. And as much as I hated accounting, I loved computer science. And so that was it for me. But I did have to plug that gap. And that's maybe like getting to Jonathan's point about how do you prepare for successful transitions by doing really badly. Like I'll be honest, I got a D in my accounting class. It was weighing down my average. It was just making me miserable. And so, and it was just making me feel very unaccomplished. I'm like, yes, I'm never going to do it. I hate it. I don't want to do it. But how do I just close that hole that like I was really bad at something? Can I get a little better? And so it was actually, I think, my 3rd year in college that I retook that course and got an A in it. And just for the sake of it, to prove it to myself that like I can do it. Interesting, many years later, I was actually responsible for the technology system for the technology platform for accounts payable, accounts receivables team. And I was like, oh, now it's all coming back. Maybe it was a good thing that I took that class over. And so I think starting out, especially first few years, is super important to build domain depth in something. And honestly, like it doesn't matter what it is, pick something you like, get great at it. And to Mary Beth's point, like, you know, be the person that can do things that others are seeking. Be the person that knows things because you've invested that time. And then the other point there is that be a part of a community. So to me, my entry-level class at JP Morgan, which was my first job out of PACE, we were a class. And so that was easy because there was like, first, I think there was like hundreds of us, and then they did subgroups, and I became really close with a group of 30. And so we sort of followed each other's careers throughout the years. And, you know, everybody ended up in all sorts of places. Some of my peers ended up being my business sponsors on projects. And so that grows your network organically. It's much harder to build the relationship with senior leaders, but it's great to build that when they're your peers. And being the person that continuously makes these relationships meaningful to both of you, to me, again, like help me make those kind of transitions between different types of industries as well.
That's so powerful. And I've always thought that the best thing about Pace University and the Seidenberg School is that it is a network. And you two have gone on to these stellar careers, and these students who are here today are in 10 years, they'll be prepping each other for their first VP interview. And in 15 years, they'll be prepping each other for their VC audition when they're trying to get big bucks to be the next Helen Altshuler. But I wanted, and I hope that you all are taking this. Hi, Simone. I hope that you are all taking this to heart. Because you've got these incredible role models here, but you've got this incredible opportunity now to network. You have a chance today to meet Mary Beth Henderson and Helen Altshuler, but you also have a chance to get to know Professor Tao and Professor Hale, and to build those relationships and those acquaintances that are going to help you this week and next year and in 20 years as you go on to your careers. You are technology people. Helen is following sort of the modern day fable of the tech person who works for Google and goes to the startup, except you also were at the big bank and went to the startup, and you've got this very classic 21st century tech career. And Mary Beth, You have been one of those IBM people, and you've spent your entire career at this amazing company and done these really, really different things. But you are both part of the same industry, the technology industry that so many of our students aspire to be part of. What does it take to be a success in the tech industry, Mary Beth?
Very good question. And I have met Helen just the one time prior, but I have to share that I also took accounting and computer science, and I did not like accounting.
There's a theme here.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Helen. So a few things. It's really important to stay current with technology and continually be learning. So while I have been at one company for my entire career, I did a little bit of secondary school teaching and coaching as I was also at IBM, but predominantly my career has been at one company. And that has become less common. But I share that even though I have been at one company, I have probably had at least 3 different careers. So I was a computer operator and a system programmer. So I also did some coding, and to go from that to hiring and recruiting. And then I became proficient in disaster recovery and resiliency and managed a data center where I was working with electricians and understanding generators and uninterrupted power supply. So it's run the gamut. So stay current. If anyone understands the history at IBM, in 1996, I believe, was the year that Lou Gerstner joined as our CEO. And that was the first time that the company started doing layoffs. And those layoffs started to become very, very frequent, especially when we began to offshore positions. So the way that I kept vital was to always be understanding the layout of the organization and the company, and what was new and where were they hiring, and to keep my skills up and to keep up that network. Very important. And one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about with COVID is I had seen this in IBM when jobs could be done in other places where labor rates were less expensive. Jobs were moved out of companies. And so one of the reasons, quite frankly, that I want to get partly back into my workplace is to be doing a job that is being done here in the US, in New York, and not a job that could go to South America or Asia. So it's really important to understand the dynamics around those things that can help you maintain and grow career.
Or go to Asia and do that job from there, because you can be anywhere now.
Yes, and see, that's Helen's got that side, and I'm the more conservative side. Yes.
I love New York. I'm not going anywhere. I love New York.
Helen's right. There's another dynamic going on with COVID, which is you can work anywhere. And so you could go down to Miami, where I think it was Jackie that's down there, or go to Asia.
Yeah. So Helen, tell us a little, and thank you so much for sharing that, Mary Beth. And that's I think a tale of personal resiliency that you have to have to survive in the world of work and to move forward with your career plan. And Helen, you've done these different things. Tell us, again, back to my original question, what does it take to be successful in technology? But what's kind of been your guide star in making these changes and finding these great opportunities?
Yeah, it's very interesting. As I went on a walk today in between meetings, I started reflecting on some of my challenges. It's funny, Jonathan, you mentioned, talking to VCs, raising money. That is currently also very relevant to me. And, and I'm seeing, some of the things, and it's just reminding me that my entire life, I've been essentially what's been driving me is doing things against all the odds. And every no to me was an opportunity to do something, to prove to myself, to prove to the person that said no, to do something better. I think that can also lead to a very anxious life, so I don't particularly recommend that. But I've always looked on the upside of what could I be that is either really hard and I need to prove that I can be there, or just takes me on a path that leads me to something more interesting than what I'm doing now. And so I would often look up to people that I admire and start talking to them. And so when I was at JP Morgan, I actually spent 17 years at JP Morgan. So that's not your typical entrepreneur, tech person. But every few years I had the opportunity to lead different teams, build different technology. My manager, for the last almost last eight years of my career, my manager figured out how to keep me from moving, and basically by giving me more and more different projects and teams over time. So I grew through that. In doing all of this, I really looked at the opportunity of who are the people that I want to learn more from. And so I started going to meetups. Once I got to the point at JP Morgan that I was working on some of the projects that touched outside of the company, I became really interested in just understanding, how do you do projects? How do you build software from scratch? How do you build products rather than internal applications? And so I started going to fintech startup meetups and meeting entrepreneurs and listening to their stories. First, I just went there to sit and listen. What are people working on? How do they do that? And then through that, I found people that I really admire, how they've just taken a leap of faith from a large bank career to fintech. And so I became more interested in those career stories. And throughout my career, basically, that's the path that I've taken.
And that's really, really wonderful. And it may be because I'm in education, but the word I keep hearing from both of you is learning. Absolutely. Continuously learning and being willing to learn new things and to take risks and putting yourself out there to learn new things. And I think that's incredibly good advice. This is the most exciting part of our program when the students ask the questions. They tend to ask very difficult questions, so take a deep breath and get ready. And I would like to begin with our own Ashley Brown with question number 1. Ashley, it's on you.
Hi, thank you, Dean Hill. This is for both Mary Beth and Helen. In your opinion, what would be the most practical solution or plan for safely returning to the workplace in person?
I mean, I'll start. It's a personal choice. It means so many different things to different people that first of all, you need to make sure you understand your situation and where you are on the risk scale, where you are on the health scale, and many other factors. And then know that there are options for every single personal situation out there. And the higher your risk factors or concerns, that pushes you more towards remote work. If you're a person that needs that social interaction, then finding a company that has a good balance of in-person plus remote, and really a company that thought a lot about that, which tends to be some of the larger companies right now. But I think that's gonna cascade. I honestly think the world is looking up to the Googles, the Microsofts, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs of the world to see if they can figure out the office. If they can, then mid-sized companies are likely to follow.
I agree with Helen's point about that being a personal choice. The larger companies have done well during COVID. One of my employees had a spouse who was being forced to go into the office in March and February when it was going on, while our company had said, everyone stay home, stay safe. In approximately 1935, Thomas Watson, who founded the IBM Corporation, created principles, one of which was respect for the individual. Our company really has that going for it. And I recall saying several times to several different people early on in the pandemic that our government is over here, over there. We're not getting clear direction. I am so thankful to be getting clear direction from my employer. And so it's been talked about in our workplace. And I think, personally, I was sharing before everyone joined that I was vaccinated on Tuesday, my first vaccine. So for me, going back to the workplace means being vaccinated and being comfortable in the space that I will be working in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice question, Ashley. And our very own Indira, how are you this afternoon, Indira?
Professor Jonathan, thank you. I'm doing great, thank you. And I'm glad to be here. I have a question to both Mary Beth and Helen. And I could relate to Helen one point that, I have taken one course which is core. I've taken parallel distribution. I felt clueless. I felt like why I came to US. So I asked professor that, why do I need to do? He said that in its core subject, you have to do it. I'm learning, I did a cloud project and I'm glad that I took the, that course. Eventually I understood the meaning of taking that course. So my question is, me being an international student, everybody suggested that, have a sponsor, which help us to succeed professionally. How do you define a sponsor and what is the best practice to get one and maintain a relationship?
So I'll take this one. Hi, Indira. So I think, through your network, I've had mentors or sponsors through my career and also helped people find them. So if you see someone that might be in a space that you want to achieve, you can ask them, or do they know someone? And one thing I feel very strongly about is that your mentors or sponsors may be ever changing. And maybe you have one that's a technology mentor in a certain space, where you have another one that's kind of watching over your career. I've had people that I've mentored who maybe I did not talk to them too interactively for a year or in a certain job that they were in, and then become very interactive again, what's going on. And one thing that's very common these days is mentorship in bi-directional mentorship. So whereby you may teach me about a new application or something, a new way of thinking, and I can share some of my skills.
Yeah, I would also kind of want to draw the distinction, mentorship versus sponsorship. And so a sponsor is someone that knows your ability and can be in the room when you're not and talk about your ability. And that you cannot create, that needs to be earned. Well, like mentorship is like a very different relationship. So I think usually your best sponsors are people that you've done great work for. And so you're not coming to study at Pace to look for a sponsor. You're coming to look for partners you can work with, mentors, of course, and through your work, through your brilliance, excelling in specific things, you also look for ways you can solve problems others can't and help them with these things. And over time, these grow into sponsorship relationships. You may solve a problem for your CS professor, that becomes your sponsor because you've done something really difficult. But the difference here is that while you can find mentors, and some of them are signed, some of them you can find through your own network. Sponsors, you need to work at it, and you need to start that by earning their trust.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, great question, Indira. Really appreciate that. And they said it couldn't happen, but she is back. Jackie, hi.
Hello. So first, I'd like to thank Helen and Mary Beth for coming today to speak with all of us. We really do appreciate your time and all the information that you had to share with us. So my question for the both of you is, For college students like me and who may work in internships and jobs that are remote in the foreseeable future, what advice can you give on how to communicate and work in ways that are effective?
That's a
Yeah,
great
I'll-
question. Uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
So earlier I said you need to insert yourself, and I really mean that. So it's easy for us to be comfortable in our space and not put ourselves out there. So you really want to make sure that people know you're there and you're active, whether it be with a current employer or people that you're networking with, and be able to demonstrate things that you're doing, have a visible online footprint, for example, in LinkedIn. So those are some things that I would encourage. You know, you're home, so people sometimes think that opportunity will come to them, and I like to say these days, the only person coming to the door is the UPS or the Amazon person. So you really have to make your way that by putting yourself out there.
And I would say learn the communication method of your employer. The variety is just huge. And depending on which company, if you work with a more modern company, like Slack, for example, is the standard. And I've seen Slack being abused so much that people are miscommunicating constantly because they are resisting having that like 10-minute sync in-person chat instead of as opposed to doing like these long Slack threads with lots of stuff where things get buried. So try to understand what's the communication method, but also reconcile with what is your personal communication style? Like, how do you learn best? And it's completely fine to bring that up to your manager and discuss how to reconcile the company's communication methods with how you learn best and what you can bring in to potentially even change that. One of the things we've done, actually, I tried that experiment at Google. It was interestingly not as successful at Google. And then I tried it again at my startup, and everybody loves it. It's the office hours. So every engineer on the team has their personal office hours, which is an hour every like 2 weeks on their calendar that they host. What that means is that they log into the remote screen, they log into the Google Meet or whatever product they're using. They sit there, they work, but anyone is welcome to come and talk about anything, from debugging problem because they're stuck on something, to asking what their favorite TV show, to just getting to know them better. And sometimes you'll get like 3 people show up in somebody's office hours, sometimes 10, sometimes none. But this has become a really good way for people to know that, first of all, anytime during the week, someone's always available because there's somebody's office hours. You can come and ask either for help or just if you're looking for that social interaction or the training aspect. And so that's been my hack, but it doesn't work in all environments. I think at Google, the reason that it didn't work as much is because there's so many meetings that no one could ever make it to anybody else's office hours.
I would like to also add, I'm a big believer in the roadmap, and Helen mentioned this in a way earlier about knowing what she was going after, but I always say you can't get where you're going if you don't know where that is. And so what are your GPS coordinates? Where are you trying to go? I don't know how many of you drive or use Waze. I have not been driving very much these days with not commuting to work, but in Waze, you can set your GPS coordinate or the location where you're going and then add stops. Your career development is like that. So what are you trying to get to? And then add intermediate goals into that plan. And one thing I want to make sure I say before we close today is there is a lot of energy and a lot of investment going in companies today around diversity and inclusion initiatives. Take advantage of those.
Great advice. Thank you so much.
That is powerful. And I believe it is your turn, Mihir.
Hi. So I want to know, because I know it's not been easy for me and nor is it for anyone. So I've succeeded in remote work. I've succeeded in remote internships past year. The biggest struggle I face with remote learning is the procrastination and the disfocus and the distraction. So what advice would you give to someone who, while of course has also succeeded managing the remote environment, but also faces these obstacles, especially when these obstacles may fear you getting in the way of your careers? Hope that answers your question, or hope you understand that.
It's hard. I actually last week I had a mentoring conversation with an engineer that actually took a leave of absence from Google because she felt like she just can't work. Like the problem is that there's so much going on your mind, and you just can't work, and you start working and then all the other thoughts or news or something that just interferes with it. And so one, working for a company that has great resources, that always is a plus. So, you know, in all of cases like this, you need access to great resources. It could be, you know, coaches, it could be, you know, healthcare related resources. It could be just tools and apps that you can find. That's always a good thing to do. But it has, the past year that has been great to people that learn best by less interaction and excel. And it's been much worse year for anyone that needs the personal interaction to maintain their personal motivation. And so like, I'm one of those people. So while I insisted on having a remote first company, building a remote first company, mostly for like, just to be equitable with all of the people that can be working in all sorts of locations, it is very hard for me to do that. And so I do several things. And again, like, you got to find your own system. I decided that my day, there's no way I can do like a typical work day, like a 9 to 5 or like an 8 to 6 or whatever way you stretch it. I need breaks throughout my day, and then I can be going indefinitely. And so I've scheduled everything into my calendar, my personal life, my work life. Again, working for an employer that lets you do that, of course, is great. By being an engineer, you're in the best position to do this because so many companies actually recognize that as an engineer, in an 8-hour day, you're really only productive 3 or 4 hours. And so like the rest is spent in meetings, context switching, debugging your environment setup, or somebody else made a change that broke your change. And so recognizing that and like putting blocks of time that are uninterrupted work, blocks of time, personal blocks of time, followed by, again, periods of work. There's a technique that someone told me about called Pomodoros, which is like, again, like these like iterative, like work break, work break, work break. That may work for some people. My biggest issue is context switching. So these like short periods of time are very difficult for me. And so if I want to do some meaningful work, I need to schedule 2-3 hour blocks of time. But then I'm so exhausted that I need to go for a walk.
Yeah, hear that.
I'm the opposite of Helen. I will sit down and work the day away, very concentrated like that. But so I think Helen's advice for you is good. One thing that I would share is that if you are finding distractions, try to find that physical and kind of mental space where you can have some interrupted time, whether it's smaller blocks or larger blocks. One thing that I like to do, and I tell people, if you don't have a separate office at the home or where you are working and you don't have a door, you can do it virtually in your mind. But when I'm finished at the end of my day, I close that door and kind of turn it off. So find that space where you can have some focus time, and depending on your style, take more or less breaks.
Yeah, I would say I just thought of another hack that like I've seen some people use successfully. Give yourself deadlines and tell your colleagues about them. So that's going to hold you accountable.
That's a good point, Helen. And everyone, you are all so important. If you need to schedule a meeting with yourself, do that. Prioritize your time with yourself to do what you need to do, whether that's coding or writing your resume or whatever. Schedule time with yourself.
I'm pretty sure debt does that quite a bit. And we have a question from the wonderful Simone Gonzalez, Star Recruit. Hi, Simone.
Thank you, Dean Hill. My question is for the both of you, and it is, what leadership skills have gotten you and your team through this pandemic? Thank you.
I call this like the resilience as a like leadership skill. I would put that in that category. I talked a lot about this also with my Google team that I managed, because a big part of the pandemic time that I spent was actually with managing my Google team, and just like resilience in focusing on a problem, focusing on what we're building, taking care of each other, and giving that just like that very thoughtful time to your colleagues. That's something that, like, for me as a leader, was very important to create the environment where people can do this, and then seeing how people can thrive in the environment where they're holding each other accountable, but they're also having each other's back. And so to me, it's just like creating that space where the team members are feeling that they can hold each other accountable, and really that's been.
And on the also on the soft skill side, I would add two things, Simone. I would say, you know, as a manager and leader of a team of people, it's really important that, and I had to do a little work on understanding the differences with all of the people that I manage, because like Helen said before, this environment is great for people who can work alone and thrive in that. I've had other people that have needed more talking, getting on the camera together and being together. So understanding the needs of the people that you are leading is important, and having respect for them. People have gone through different challenges during COVID, and our company actually came out with a communication that said, hey, if a kid runs in the background behind, it's okay. If you hear dogs barking, these things are okay. People are working in homes with everybody home, and it might be noisy. So just having respect for what people might be going through during this time is important.
That's really very useful stuff. We are about out of time, and I want to thank, as always, our wonderful students and our dear faculty, Dr. Tao, Dr. Mostero, Dr. Hale, B. Tracy, and others of you who have made time to come out today and hear our wonderful alums. I hope you took notes. I did. This is some just wonderful advice for careers. And I think for the many young women who are here, we're so proud that in the tradition of our founding dean, Sue Merritt, that we really do have a far above average percentage of women in our classes and women on our faculty, and they need you, and we all need this to see the examples that you set, and we're so very proud of what you do, and so grateful to you both, Mary Beth and Helen, for coming back and spending some time with us. Let's do this again very, very soon. And to all of you, we have a slate of wonderful events coming up in the next few weeks. Det, do you want to just throw those dates at us if you have them handy?
Yes, absolutely. And it's all your good fortune that since you're here, it's mandatory for you guys to attend all the other sessions we have coming up. But to Dean Hill's point, we have a really incredible calendar of top-notch industry executives who are role models, you know, very much like Mary Beth and Helen, who are with us today. Just three immediate things that I think would be really interesting for you all. On April 6th, we will be celebrating Sigal Zarmi, who is the International Chief Information Officer and Global Head of Transformation at Morgan Stanley. She is being recognized for her industry achievements as part of our annual Seidenberg Innovation Awards series. So please sign up and attend as well, because she is going to be an incredible person to learn from. And if you also can, please join us for April 20th, which is when we're going to celebrate Eileen Mahoney, who is a PACE alum. And she's very close to my heart, not only because of that, but she also is the global CIO for one of the premier iconic companies in the entire world, PVH. So they license brands such as Tommy Hilfiger, Speedo, Michael Kors, and she has a really great perspective on what it means to lead, in this very creative space. And finally, but not last, speaking of creativity, Josh Silverman is the CEO of Etsy, and I'm sure you all know Etsy. You've probably bought, wonderful things, from that platform, made money from it as well. I hope as a seller, and he's going to be with us to share, his insights on creative leadership, what it means to build and scaffold on consumer retail platforms in the online space. He's been incredibly successful, and it'll be, I think, wonderful. I mean, a lot for us, for you all to join and be part of the conversation. And if you have questions at all about any of those events, please feel free to email me at any time, and I'm happy to speak with you about that. But yes, to affirm, Dean Hill's sentiments, it's been such a pleasure and privilege to have you all be part of our community. Thanks again to Mary Beth and Helen for your incredible time and your expertise. And I just want to ask you ladies, if you could just stick with us for a few minutes afterwards, to debrief as well.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful questions.
Yeah, and if you have a moment, Professor Hale, maybe you join us.
I'd be delighted.
Great. Thank you, everybody. See you all very, very soon. Jackie, Simone, Mihir, Indira, and our wonderful Ashley, thank you for the great questions. And we will do this again so that more of you get a chance to have your questions answered.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Bye, everybody.